ideally that would go while this is going, while we're talking. All right, so comics people, welcome. Today, Mike and I decided to read an essay from the back of the Anthology of Mind by Tommi Musturi, put out by Fantagraphics. It came out in 2019, and when I got this, I was really intrigued because I saw Gabe had posted stuff about it on his site, and I was like, whoa, this rules. And he goes, you know, the best part's actually that essay in the back. So I waited, of course, because don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And never read it. And then I finally did read it, and I was like, hell yeah. So here we are. The essay is called The Prison of Style. And in parentheses, it says, and an escape plan.
All right.
By Tommi Musturi.
Let's go.
Style is something recognizable, identifiable, permanent, unchanging, stagnant, and cautious. It is a form of fear. Fear of change, fear of loss, and fear of being different. Style is well established, and the artist is easily recognized. The artist knows what to do and how to do it. On the other hand, the audience gets what it expects. Things fall into place. The same formula can be seen in both mainstream and underground, as if creating and experiencing have each gone their own way. The artist just goes with the flow. Critics are able to develop an opinion as long as they can chew on things long enough and the taste is familiar. We are living in a society where everything has the same taste. Americans have a habit of adding sugar to everything. In Russia, all the food is dripping with grease. An old sanitarium saying goes, the more you eat porridge, the less you want anything else. It is of course possible to dedicate your life to only one thing and dive into the details. However, different tastes and cuisines give the porridge new context.
Style can be appealing to the audience for a variety of reasons. It can be purely pleasing aesthetic experience. Style can resonate with a consumer's own identity and place in the world. It can be loosely contemporary or trigger childhood memories of popular culture, thus evoking nostalgia. A typical audience does not analyze why something is appealing. It is simply just, quote, important or, quote, good. Contents are not subject to analysis. Instead, the experience is all that counts. Overanalyzation is not preferred because it can interfere with communication, the ability to experience. In the worst case, style is only applied on the surface. Meanings then develop only from the relation of the work to the consumer's own identity and realm of experience. In the complex world of the 21st century, people often want something simple. The mere surface has already been branded onto products many times over. In the age of social media, hundreds of millions of people can personally relate to a single piece of work. Imagine a world where everyone shares the same experiences from childhood. The only thing needed for their growth is a single eternal porridge, which feeds all of their senses. It is useful for capitalism to disarm people as early as possible. Style is indeed specifically a capitalistic tool. Markets force the same product to be wrapped in different packages to reach different audiences. The aim is to offer something that is already familiar to the receiver. Bringing up new ideas, plain information, or ideological content is simply bad for business. In a firmly entrenched style, development is made on a nuanced level, in small details or processes. These types of changes are almost imperceptible to the audience. They can alter the experience, but they don't affect the content. Style is the enemy of the artist. It distorts the experience. The work should lay upon the audience like a gentle rainfall in the midst of sunshine. You must be able to move people and be moved yourself.
The artist who has found a distinct style becomes apathetic. The work becomes formal and energy ceases to flow. The quality of the work is diminished and creativity devolves into a series of repetitions. Mannerisms are born. The artist is still liked by the audience that subconsciously remembers the good times and is prone to loyalty. The artist likes the audience for appreciating the style. It is a symbiotic relationship, but symptomatic. In the mind of the audience, the artist's first work is still the best. The capitalistic machinery likes the artist and the style, but first and foremost, it likes the audience because it is the yeast in the commercial dough. The machinery markets the artist, but in particular, it markets the style. Market research determines what kind of person might need this and that. At the same time, the audience's thought process has atrophied. The artist's work are attractive because their style evokes a feeling of security. The relationship has turned serious. Things have become familiar. In the warmth of the fireplace of the artist and the audience both feel cozy. People have a tendency towards self-indulgence. It would be rather inconvenient to stick your head into the flames of the fireplace. But that's exactly what you should do in order to learn something new. The goal is the development of mankind as a species. Only individual thinking and the ability to make personal choices can save the environment we have conquered so supremely, the earth. Styles usually reflect their time. Social pressure forces many artists to stick to the styles of the times. Most people take interest in things based on external properties. It's frightening to be left out of a scene. Not having a style is perceived as lacking in identity. Most artists craft their own identity around external attributes. People of the 21st century have a compelling need to belong to something. In the middle of constant change, people seek safety in anything perceived as their own. The punk rocker, the golfer, and the fisherman all need their own group. Without it, they don't exist, or at least something seems to be missing. Everything is insignificant next to nothingness. We need like-minded support to maintain our own simple world. We experience things together. We watch reruns. The tears triggered by a nostalgic, generation-defining moment emphasizes all of this. At the same time, the algorithms of social media try to offer us like-minded friends, and yet more of the same old thing in a new wrapping. We look in the mirror, and we don't know exactly what to make of what we see. If we had to take off our clothes, jewelry, makeup, tattoos, and artificial nails, we wouldn't feel very comfortable. It's hard to see in the mirror that your face is not symmetric.
The market economy loves a product that is easily recognizable and easy to sell. The hive mind of social media is used by commercial operators to infiltrate the world with whatever they wish in just milliseconds of time. Proven styles and content from monoculture are being recycled and commercialized faster by the day. The experimental imagery of yesterday decorates the underpants of today. In order to avoid the struggle, most artists sell out. To tolerate themselves, they become distorted. This is a defensive mechanism of our body and mind. Social media is full of visual streams where artists copy each other ad nauseum. Every corner of the world simultaneously has identical subgenres, from 3D effects to outsider art, risograph printed fanzines with phony innovations copied from the art world, all the same sounds and uniforms, and so on and so forth. On the opposing side, mentally declining geezers who represent the past are laughing to themselves in their own cliques. Connections between old and new occur less frequently than ever. The gaps between them seem wider than ever. Historical significance does not fit the commercial framework. The same thing can be sold several times to ignorant people. The transition to new technologies necessitated by the internet was well-timed from the viewpoint of financial powers. The relatively free internet of the 1990s was mostly a privilege of a small group. The development of the internet was fueled by the enthusiasm for a new digital age. The commercialization of the internet was, however, enabled by the net itself. In the Western world, the biased global media deliberately equated free internet with drug-dealing criminals sharing music and movies using peer-to-peer technologies. More often than not, these lawbreakers were just teenagers who were subconsciously attracted to the idea of freedom. Changes in the net often remain invisible to the end user, still everyone has to understand that by the 2010s, the information, viewpoints, and experiences gathered from the net are not objective. Usually there's an underlying attempt to sell something, but essentially it is a question of power. Beneath different visual surfaces, there are things growing that we are not aware of. The entity strives for automation, presumably in an attempt to eliminate the human factor. The Nazi soldier who pulled the lever of the gas chamber often never grasped the consequences of his actions. Likewise, we are not aware the consequences of our clicks. In the final climax of the global commercial machinery, no single individual is responsible. The power has been automated to serve profits and compound itself.
Globalization has diminished the margins in all fields of culture. The ruling class defines both old and new. The artist must either precisely select an audience from the underground or stick to the codex of the mainstream. The similarities between truly creative work and the mainstream are getting fewer all the time. Publications, media, stores, venues, and internet forums are so removed from culture containing real and important thinking that such perspectives are encountered only by those who specifically look for them. The effectiveness of culture is minimal or only superficially apparent. People asking for change, preaching for others to do the same. Governmentally, culture exists only as a budget, numbers on paper, like a relic. Its power has been subsumed by profit margins. Experiences are hard to quantify, as a work of art can elicit positive or negative reactions and be valuable from both points of view. At the same time, the mainstream attitude towards culture, education, and knowledge has turned hostile. I repeat, it is all about power, and power is the means and ability to make a difference. Nations have been ruled for centuries by withholding education. There was a time when the art of printing was tightly guarded, because it was the most important tool of power and education. Former colonies in Africa and South America are still suffering from inadequate printing resources. Print has been superseded by social media in enabling and consolidating global control. It is essential for today's market economy to consider the human mind a commodity as quantifiable as a toaster and vibrator in the, quote, Internet of Things, end quote. With money being the ultimate authority, the net is defined in all respects in a prescribed manner that reflects this. Both the contents and the user are defined by their economics. When net traffic builds a well-organized data mass, there is nothing media can offer to dissident culture. It has been said that a feeling of emptiness best describes this beginning of the new millennium. Humanity has trouble adapting to the constantly changing and formless virtual world. The internet increasingly resembles a mirror in which net addicts marvel at their own image. The 90s dream of information, culture, and education made available to everyone has been drowned in a false sense of freedom. The artists and intellectual property owners are both responsible for dumbing down the public because rights have become commodities. Organizations and net purists have seldom agreed, even though they are the ones who should have collaborated on defining what information should be shared on the net and how. However, the current net regime remains vulnerable and the public is not irrevocably dumbed down. We must seek alternatives and preserve them. But most importantly, the channels and platforms for expressing different ideas must be maintained. Any culture will cease to exist and any revolutionary idea will be forgotten if there is no venue to express it.
Artists choose their publishing platform according to what their work represents. Hipsters, museum art painters, and amateur daubers all have their own preferred publishing channels. They all share a strict common view of what their art consists of and who does not belong in their group. This is comparable to peer support. All this has very little significance. Museums resemble graveyards, and the local gallery's guestbook gains 5 names per day. This is not sustainable, and national culture funding is wasted. Artists must go where they are not wanted or expected. It is most important to communicate with common people. Instead of enjoying pleasant company in high society, you must be completely on your own if the situation demands it. Quote, artistic capital, end quote, is an oxymoron. Forget it. That is not what matters. Many artists collect books containing visual reference material. Styles are blatantly copied, technically as well as semiotically. Some teachers even encourage this. In the meantime, scientists cannot base their methodology on one source only, even when they are employed by a commercial entity. They must learn everything about the desired truth and its counterforces and form their view about the subject with these facts in hand. Similarly, artists must build bridges using their education and experiences. You must strive for wisdom. Stealing is not wise for the artist because it is hardly educating. You must try to learn constantly and aim beyond what can be found in books. You must distance yourself from influences, but also know the way back to communicate your findings. It is futile to claim that everything has already been done, as if that would justify copying. Despite the space being carved, the scope of possibilities is limitless for our feeble species. The commercial stream of culture tries to pigeonhole everything it encounters. Artists shouldn't consider this when creating, but they must acknowledge different styles in their references. Content-focused artists should indeed be interested in the mainstream and how it works. The goal still is to communicate to the common people in a language they can understand. Different fields of art converge with people in very different ways. For example, almost everyone reads comics as a child, which makes them a good means of communication to reach common people. At the same time, artists can use generation-defining moments as a reference point to communicate to particular groups of people. To successfully communicate ideas to large groups of people, the artist should choose a style which is somehow familiar to the recipient. The scheme is to utilize capitalistic means to serve the artist. This does not mean compromise. Within these restrictions, freedom can be subversively planted. When the recipient has been tempted to study the work, the artist can communicate inconvenient matters too. The recipient will probably be ready for this. Even though our age seems to encourage stupidity and mediocrity, the recipient can prove surprisingly susceptible when he decides to be. In an ideal situation, the recipient gains insight and becomes able to digest through thought-provoking content alongside the usual entertainment. The quest for finding new audiences is a long one. The artist must have something to say and know how to say it. In addition to creating art, you have to find publishing channels. The idea that a good work of art will speak for itself is regrettably wrong these days.
Typically in the 21st century, styles only rarely reveal any real content underneath. Content here refers to the willful communication of something to someone, the ability to crystallize the essence of a moment, to express a different viewpoint about something, to make unexpected associations, and to understand and communicate something fundamental about life and get the message through to ordinary people. The basis for a work of art must be the content. Popularity is besides the point. The content itself must dictate the form that suits it best. The artist creates a style within the chosen form of expression to best communicate the content. This is essential. As with letters and text and spoken language, likewise, an artist's style is born to serve a special purpose. It tries to communicate the message as accurately as possible. Accuracy is not only pure information, but something much subtler. The first rays of the morning sun look completely different depending on the moment, location, and the person observing them. Instead of repetition and copying, you should try to capture the actual moments and wholes, using all senses. As a comics artist, I consider the relation between text and images thoroughly before starting work. Do I need colors? What kind of rhythm would suit the comic? What is best left for the audience to figure out, and what should be explained? Who is my target audience? And so on. The style of the work is composed of many components, and it rarely has anything to do with what you personally like. More often than not, artists have to be challenging themselves. They must step out of their comfort zone and sacrifice style, beauty, and general acceptance. You must draw difficult things. You must break something. As an artist, you must go through constant self-scrutiny. This will bring out your own unique identity. The artist's self is not superficial style. The content defines your identity. What do I say? What do I want to say? What am I? The artist can deliver clear ideas, give different views, or just challenge the audience and develop its ability to sense, experience, and finally, think. In order to succeed, the artist's expression must be free and wide-ranging. You must be willing and able to learn. Communication is at the core of everything. The artist must think, what is the message and how to get it across to the audience? A comics artist's style can be defined by the illustrations, color schemes, narratives, contents, and details. The methods of communication are unlimited. Freedom can be intimidating, but tireless work will teach you to understand its approximate meaning. Different work methods and corresponding tools, different lengths, different formats for publication, and different venues must be exhausted. All this is possible because it is you who decides what to do. I use the term, quote, creative spectrum, end quote. It is a state of mind and body where thoughts and ideas find their expression and formats naturally.
Forms of expression and styles can be compared to languages and dialects. You don't have to know all of them as long as you're being understood. Playing the banjo teaches the artist something besides music itself, but also about rhythm, structure, and nuances, all of which are essential to comic artists. Different forms of expression and styles must be understood as a broader spectrum of communication and creativity, which has no boundaries. Pigeonholing is a symptom of capitalism. In the beginning, there was voice and rhythm, later music, much later came, quote, adult rock, and finally a concept shop from where you can choose between a hip-hop and goth rock uniform. The artist must not think about genre, but instead, what is the message? It's dangerous to develop your own art on terms of style. You must be conscious of what you're doing, but act on instinct. Not having a style may develop into a style itself, a compulsive need to act differently or unpleasant expectations of renewal. It is more important to be unexpected. You must be conscious of your earlier work and what the audience thinks about it. Neither party should be filled with too much satisfaction. In dance terms, the artist must be the one who leads the audience and not the other way around. At its best, both sides advance to learn something new about themselves. Routinely changing styles may help artists understand themselves. With every message in their respective visual or narrative style, the artist must go through every detail in his working process. Being associated with no particular style creates a feeling of freedom because the artist does not have to represent anything. It gives a broader perspective of the work and makes it easier to manage as a whole in addition to its numerous components. The various influences and references become audience-startling surgical strikes. Stylistic requirements naturally have an influence on the content, i.e., the message which the artist tries to get across. One artist is always obliged to be funny, another must offer excitement. Contemporary art trends may require sketchy drawing from someone. Political correctness is natural to one, whereas another wants to smash every imaginable taboo. I repeat, the artist must constantly change. Your work must reflect life. Life is a stream of different experiences and feelings. Sorrow is often the prerequisite to happiness. Hate is born out of fear. Sound is louder after silence. Explosions are more powerful when they break the steady course of everyday life.
The most adaptive species survive in nature. Nonetheless, a zebra's style may seem timeless, and an elephant's trunk looks as long as it was yesterday. In reality, our ecosystem is under constant change, regardless of humans. Butterflies in industrial cities change their coloring according to pollution in the air. The blueberry is a candidate among other varieties to vanish from Finnish nature due to climate change. In the sphere of biodiversity, it's impossible to imagine any species that could remain the same forever. The brain of a digital native born in the 2000s is already developing in a completely new direction. Stability is not typical to nature. The human race is not conscious of its fight for survival. But that is precisely what it is constantly going through. Capitalism aims to simplify things in order to control humanity easier. Biodiversity is simplified with intensive production processes and gene manipulation. The plan is crumbling, however. Marginal art may one day rise from misery to domination, but it will require tireless work and watching for opportunity. When it knocks, you must rise and be ready to communicate your message.
All right, so what did you think of that essay?
I thought there was a lot of good stuff in it. One of the things that came to mind immediately was it echoed some of the sentiments of, did you ever read that Nicholas Boyard, art in the age of post-industrial art in the age of post-industrial?
No, I know what you're talking about, but I have not read it.
He basically, or like postmodern it's called, I forget. But he's basically saying the line on that is really cool, actually.
I like this pen.
You know, I have it, but I haven't really used it that much, and I'm really liking this line.
You can, look at this. You can get...
Yeah.
And you can
it's
get...
really nice, actually.
It's got a really wide variety.
Yeah. I guess, I hadn't worked with it big, and I think that makes a big difference. I was trying to work with it real small, and I felt like it was a little unwieldy for me, small, but big, I really like it. Anyway, it reminds me a little of that Nicholas Boyard where he's talking about the difference between the plasmic image and the plastic image. The plasmic image being, of plasma, of blood, like it's your core, it's real, it's honest, you're bleeding on the page. And the plastic is fake, it's surface, it's everything that is veneer, right? And so it recalled to me bits of that. And, that essay is really something because it does kind of call out how capitalism homogenizes everything. And we see that one, today.
The Musturi one or
the Musturi one, yeah, the Musturi one. Specifically because he's railing against capitalism. And, I am an anti-capitalist for sure.
Same. Let's get that on the record.
Yeah, let's talk about that because I just, that's a whole other video. But so what I liked about it was he was saying like, oh yeah, it just needs to pigeonhole everything and it needs it to fit in these little categories. And it's true, like, look at this nostalgia culture art that we see everywhere, right? It's like, I like this X property, and I like this property, so I'm going to mash them together, and you're going to love it because you like this and that. So why couldn't you not like this? We see it a lot with children's books. There's a lot of pandering, like...
Yeah.
Dragons that eat nachos. Like, oh, yeah, okay, you like dragons and you like nachos. It's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and they all have laser swords from a famous sci-fi fantasy movie. You know, it's like, give me a break.
Well, so children's books, and I think I mentioned this before in one episode, I don't remember where, but like the children's books that I see at our school that have come out in the last few years all look not the same, but they all fit the same aesthetic. They all look like they're drawn with the same Procreate brushes. They all look like they have the same kind of color palette. They fit a thing that could be animated if you wanted it to be. And I find that just like really upsetting. And I think some of the most formative kind of children's books that stand out in my mind from being a kid are like bizarre and weird and strange and challenging. And I think about this thing that Jim Henson said all the time about how somebody asked him why his movies are scary. and he said they think it's really valuable for kids to feel scared as kids, so that by the time when they grow up, being afraid is not an unfamiliar emotion,
Right.
And they can learn how to deal with it in a safe space at their home or the movie theater, and talk about it with their parents during or afterward.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think so much of the kids' content that I've seen recently is like so neutered of anything challenging. Not to get all like unwokey or whatever. Like if they're just like pandering is a good word. Like it's not pandering. Pushing them to consider things as much, and it's kind of giving them these soft answers on racism and on I guess like immigration or like learning about other people, and like all these things are objectively good, but I kind of feel like the way that they're being described are just telling kids things rather than allowing them to have these discoveries and experiences and feel those things. Maybe this is getting off topic for the style thing.
No, I don't think so. I think because what you're talking about is a symptom of something that needs to sell.
Right.
So they need to sell the thing, and so what happens is it loses any of the original intention of the artist. And you know what I think that essay does well is it calls out artists. It says wake up, you know, it says like you're missing the plot.
Right.
The plot is not make something that can sell and that's how you're a successful artist. It's constantly change, constantly challenge yourself, question your environment, have a real experience, have critical thinking, have an original thought, and then use your art as a vehicle to deliver that original thought to your audience.
And I think it's also calling people out to wake up to the fact that as artists, especially artists who've gone to art school, I went to art school, and
I did not.
You are kind of groomed to have a style. Like your portfolio should reflect a consistent style. And I think something that the essay is calling for us to consider is that this is to turn you into a product. This is to turn your art and your emotion and your expression, your feeling into something some art director can see as something they can sell to get you on the cover of the New Yorker or whatever.
Right.
You know, I think like commercial illustration, that like every commercial illustration artist who is somehow still working in the field should read that essay or hopefully listen to that essay. And I would love to talk to commercial artists about that too, because I feel like of the commercial artists that I've talked to who do editorial stuff and stuff like that, like you are groomed to have a style, and if you try to do anything outside of that, you know, your agent's going to be like, well, they wanted you to do this, or
it's like, what are you doing? They're like, what is this?
Right.
I recently made like a children's book, and I had an agent quit just recently because they were like, I don't know how to market this, and I'm like, so let me get this straight. You sent out 10 emails, and when you only heard back a no from 5 of them, you gave up. I was like, that's what you do? I'm like, because it didn't immediately find a publisher who was willing to take a chance on it. You just quit. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about all the great children's book artists who came before. And I was thinking none of them found their publisher right away. And I was like, you got to believe in the project. So in the end, it's a good thing. One, I don't care about rejection. It's just redirection. I'm going to find somebody who's actually going to get the power of the thing and want to get on board. And 2, good, quit now.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to quit fucking now.
Yeah,
get out of here. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I now know what you're made of. You want to quit. Good. So quit. Like, fuck off.
Get
like,
out of here.
And so
I wish I never met you.
It's like that thing. It's like, you know, if you're dating someone and they're going to cheat on you or whatever, or they're going to dump you, have them do it in the first week instead of the 100th week.
Yeah, or talk about, you know, extra outer relationship exploration.
Or just be honest.
Have that conversation, be honest about it.
But I just mean, like, if they are going to dump you, it's better sooner than later.
Definitely.
Is what I'm saying.
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
like, yes, of course,
100%.
we can all have better, more skillful interpersonal relationships. My thing is, like, if you're going to quit, fucking bye. Goodbye.
Mm-hmm. But the other side of that essay that I think is a little harder for me to swallow is that I don't know if I'm interpreting this the way it was written or the way it was meant, but like I don't know if having a recognizable style is inherently bad.
No, I don't think so.
I wonder if it's like is it the striving for recognizable style that's harmful, or like a marketable style or something? Because I think like so much of the joy of drawing for me over the years, and less so now because I think I'm kind of trying to break away from the way I draw from having like a single kind of style.
Sure.
But over the years, the joy for me, a lot of it was like I would do drawings and be dissatisfied with them, and it was that dissatisfaction that kept me going. Where it was like I can see in my head what I wanted this drawing to look like when it's done. I could see in my head like how it was not that. And I could see the distance between the drawing I made and the drawing I wanted to make, and that was incredibly motivating for me, and it's gotten me, I think, to where I am now, which is like a really comfortable place of feeling like I can draw whatever I want, and I like the idea that someone can see something on the web somewhere and be like, oh, I think that's a Mike Shea drawing or something like that. Like I kind of enjoy that.
Yeah.
But I guess the hope is that like you can have that feeling in multiple ways. Like I almost feel like if Tommy put out a book without their name on it, I might be able to pick it out anyway. There's like an approach, in the myriad styles they work in.
Yeah,
there is a philosophical approach that is almost visual.
Yeah, and I think philosophical is a good way to put it, because what I got was not that you shouldn't have a style, and we talk about this a lot on the channel, which is this their honest, like, is this exactly the way they're like putting it? Okay, let me rephrase this. My favorite artists are the ones that go all in on their thing and it comes out a certain way, and they're like, that's my style. Mm-hmm. They're trying their hardest to make the best image they can, and that's what comes out, and that ultimately is their hand, and therefore it is honest, and it is direct, and it is their style. And I think Tommy's saying is like, in my opinion, he's not saying having a style is bad. He's saying that shouldn't be your goal.
Yeah.
And, not everyone can affect myriad styles like he can, right?
I don't think I would enjoy it if I tried to. Like,
he made a book with 20 different stories, and each one of them's in a different style. Not everybody can do that, right? Mm-hmm. So some people are out there just trying their best, and whatever comes out, comes out. But that's in line with what he was saying, because he was saying like, oh, you gotta wait for it to dry.
No, I know, I was curious. Well, so I'm pushing myself here.
That might be water-based too.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think that's just
super black. Solvent-based, I mean.
I think it's super black.
Oh, yeah, then yeah. So I think, to your point, it's like, he was saying don't lose the plot. Don't lose the point of being an artist. It's not to, like, create a product. It's to deliver a message. And the case that it comes in should aid that message delivery. It should be a fully considered system of delivery. So whatever's most effective to deliver your idea, that's the style you should be working in.
Yeah. I think that's something that I maybe take a little bit of issue with, just from my own personal interest, because I do also believe in, I guess what you call automatic drawing, which is sort of what I'm doing now, is drawing without intention.
Exactly,
Like I think what we're doing here is exploring maybe styles we don't always work in a visual sense, but this is almost antithetical to what he was describing, which is like there is no motivation under this style. This is pure style exploration. But I don't think this is bad either. Yeah, well, again, I think for me it comes back to honesty. So like if you're earnest in your mark making, right? Because what you're saying is like the way you phrase that, it's like it's almost more strategy, right? Like yes, everything should be considered, and the way your work lives in the world should be considered, but how much strategy are you putting in? You know what I mean? It's like he's saying like consider your style in the way that most suits the information you're trying to deliver, but like is at some point maybe you get in your own way with that, like maybe that is too much consideration, right? And like automatic drawing is honest in a different way. But I really do like a lot of what he's saying. He's saying totally, I'm not he's like don't let the algorithm turn you into a product, essentially. Yeah, and it's so well articulated that it didn't come across to me as like Luddical. He's not being like a Luddite about it. Right, exactly. He's not a grumpy old man shaking a stick at you. Right. And I think he's more challenging and calling to attention why we're doing these things and getting us to consider why we're buying into these things so easily. And the other part about this is like in the United States, the arts are not supported. Right. And if you want to be an artist, like you need to find a way to commodify yourself. That's a good point. Make money, and it's an enormous part of why I started teaching. Is I was like, I hate the artwork I make for other people. Basically. And so I was like, I need to engage with the artwork in a different way, because I feel like shit at the end of the day selling the things that I'm making, and also working in like web design and stuff like that.
Oh my god.
No disrespect to any people who like web design, but it's not for me.
Same.
And it made me just feel awful at the end of the day. I was like, this is not the creativity that stimulates me, and I spend the whole day thinking about drawing, and
Absolutely.
But anytime I went freelance, like I would kind of bounce around from office to office, and then once I got sick of it and couldn't take it anymore, I would quit and I'd work from home. But all the freelance artwork I did, I pretty much hated. You know, it's like doing some like rich 25-year-olds like t-shirt company graphics or something, and you meet them at a coffee shop, and you're like, I want to have. I did some drawings I'm like deeply ashamed of, and that's why I don't want anyone to see.
That's amazing. So now we got to hunt out the drawings that Mike is.
I'll show him. Whatever.
I'm just kidding.
There's one. I'll describe it. If this guy was doing these like animal.
Dude, if you get paid every once in a while, it's not the worst thing in the world, you know.
Yeah, but it wasn't even like a. It was like a sad amount of money. Like I felt like I felt like I was like turning tricks. Like again, like no offense to like sex work.
Yeah,
like,
sex work is real work.
Sex work is real work, but like to me, I felt dirty.
You felt
afterward.
dirty.
I was like, I just spent like a dozen hours of my time for to be able to buy a sandwich. And here's a drawing you can license forever and do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
Actually, I had a guy change the artwork I made after I told him I didn't want to work for him anymore. He had somebody else draw my drawings and put them on shirts.
I had a well-known fast food place completely steal my mural and turn it into their branding idea. I mean,
we can bleep that out.
yeah, it was.
I had a feeling.
Yeah. So I was trying to explain intellectual property to them, and I was like, okay, so if I do a mural in your kid's room of Bart Simpson, you pay me to do the mural, and that mural is on your wall, but you don't own Bart Simpson,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, how do you not understand that?
Anyway, so
back to
the commodification of style was something where I was like, I couldn't get an agent. Like when I was shopping my portfolio around, I got the same response. It was like, your stuff is pretty all over the place. Like we would have a hard time for anyone who responded. Most of the time you're shopping for an agent, they just ignore you. Yeah. Unless you've like gone through the SVA machine or whatever.
Right. You know what's funny too about that is that the more you have a style, the less the clients want that style. So there is weirdly a kind of freedom that way too, where it's like, well, you draw like this, I want you to draw that. Mm-hmm. I think that's funny. But yeah, I don't. I think one of my takeaways from the essay is that we should just be constantly challenging ourselves and pushing deeper into our making, questioning why we make, what we make, and what we're trying to say. And I think all those things are good. And he's like, just don't lose the plot, right? Like that's my takeaway was like, an artist you should be expanding consciousness. He's saying like, do something with your gift, like create new ideas, and that I think is what it's about. It's like distill your experience in a way where you relate those experiences to encourage people to have original thought.
Yeah.
Don't just poop out a Funko Pop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I like that he mentions being multidisciplinary. Like he talks about playing the banjo.
Right.
I think that's something I try to tell the kids too, because sometimes they'll be like, I want to be an artist when I grow up. And someone else will be like, I want to be a scientist. And I can say, well, like, you can be both of those things. Like another thing about capitalism is they try to shoehorn you into one craft or one outlet or one job. So you become like a drone machine for obedience, I guess. I was at the dentist today, and the dentist asked me some questions and was surprised that I knew things about dentistry and was like, why? She was like, why didn't you become a dentist? And I was like, well, there's other things to be. Like, I was like, I'm not passionate about being in people's mouths all day. I'm an artist. I just like to know about them. I'm curious, like stuff that I don't know. Yeah. And if we're going to talk about it, I want to be able to speak on it to a certain degree. I'm curious. I ask questions. I want to know stuff. And that's what I think Musturi is saying a little bit. Is like, dig in, like ask questions, be curious, push yourself, self-scrutinize. Yeah. They were saying self-scrutinize, challenge yourself to make something different.
and to ask yourself why you make it.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, my last little thing was just that it's nice to not just be some kind of like mechanism of some bland corporate mechanism, you know, just another lever in a balanced spreadsheet.
Yeah, and I do think that translates over to other disciplines as well. Like, I mean, he makes a lot of and I guess this is just a product of writing a manifesto or an essay, is you have to speak declaratively. But there are some things in there where I'm like, that's sometimes true. I don't know if that's always true.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, like talking about, you always like the artist's first thing the best.
Well, a lot of people are like that, though.
I know, but that kind of goes against, I don't know, doesn't that... I guess he's saying, like, if you have a recognizable style, people will like the first thing the best, because it's the freshest on your mind.
They're like, they still do that. Like, people like the keep on trucking thing that they saw first, you know? It's like, they just, like, instill this thing. You know, people come up to me and say, oh, I like your astronaut series the best.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the most boring one I did. That's the one that looks like photographs. Why is that interesting, you know?
Yeah. But I also think some of that is posturing. Like, I think some of that is like fandom stuff of like, I was there first. Like, I kind of think that argument ignores a little bit about how like people who are adamant about saying I like the first thing first is they're just trying to say that they knew about the first thing. Yeah,
that's fair. Did. That's a good point. Yeah, it doesn't mention that at all, but you're right. It is a declarative, like from the stance of the fan being like, I was here since day one. Yeah. This is what I like. I like that beginning.
I like the bends the best before they got all weird.
Yeah, I like that record, the one that they only put out on a 7-inch.
Yeah. And sometimes that stuff is genuine. Like there are bands where I like their first album the best or whatever, but it's I still listen to the other ones because I'm interested. Like if it's a band I really like, I want to hear the one that people don't like. You know, I want to hear it. I might also not like it, but I want to not like it for my own reasons.
For sure.
And I like the fact that they're, you know, going outside of that stylistic zone.
Yeah.
Especially things that are so like gate kept, like metal, especially like black metal. It's like a notoriously stingy little. Not that you can pigeonhole any kind of community to being one thing, but it's notorious for people to be like, that's not this. That's not what I've defined to be this.
Right.
And I think when bands try to be more melodic or they try to be more poppy or something, like they get annihilated in certain communities.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there is something to alienating a fan base when you change your style, you know? Like there's a lot of artists who reinvented themselves all the time. They lost some people in that, but ultimately they'll come back around if they're really fans, you know? And one of the other things that I thought of when you said like people like to, it's declarative, like people want to say they've been there since day one. Some people just don't have entree into talking about art. So they just go, well, I like this. So that they have a place to start the conversation, honestly. And it's not always about like, well, I like your simple stuff or I like the thing that I first saw. Right. It's just like, I just don't know how to talk about it, so let's start here. You know, it's like, a lot of times anxiety wins the day.
Totally. And if they don't have what I would categorize as interesting taste, the first one makes you seem cool.
Yeah, fair.
I guess if you're like, I like Jon Favreau before he made the Marvel movies.
Yeah, you can't reproach. Right, exactly. There's no reproach.
You like swingers?
He likes swingers. He likes sitting in the dark drinking orange juice all day while watching Woody Allen movies.
I fucking hate swingers. I hate that movie so much. I don't know why.
It's because you don't even know how much money you have.
Oh, God. I feel like it was tailor-made for, like, dorks to quote at each other.
Yeah, well,
it's like pre-internet meme where stuff is like designed to be Tumblr now, or I guess TikTok.
I will say Vince Vaughn in Swingers at the time when that came out was very funny to me because no one was acting like him. No one was as like boisterous and skilled at conversation. You know, I don't know.
I like Vince Vaughn. I don't have a problem with Vince Vaughn. There's just something so smug about that movie.
Sure, yeah. Well, any movie you write with your friends is going to be weird. It's probably smug.
I think it's really hard to have a visual style, like a film visual style. I don't know. I wonder what medium it's the hardest to have a recognizable style in. Photography, maybe?
That's a good question. You know what I tell the kids when I'm talking about style? I say style is the sum total of all the choices you make while you're making a thing. So,
sorry, I got paint on your thing.
Oh, it's fine. That's what we're doing here. I always say, I just go, style is like, it's the total. You make a bunch of choices. I go, what is a star? You know, what shape is a Starbucks logo? It's round. And what's in the inside of a Starbucks logo? That logo? That weird. Logo. I go that weird mermaid, and I go, you know, and what color is it? And they're like, it's green, and I'm like, that's right. Okay, so they make those choices every time. They make those same choices every time, and they get the same result. Yeah. I go, so if you affect a style, you're just making the same choice every time. And the same series of choices will add up to the same sum total, and that's your style. And I go, so don't consider the style first. I always say, make the choices first. And if you want your style to change, increase your ability to draw things. Like, you know, learn how to draw an ear if you want your ear's style to get better. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they're into it. They're like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Like, it's hard to explain style to a child.
Totally. Style child.
Sick.
It's also, I don't think style, this is actually like a developmental speculation, I guess, is style actually doesn't emerge developmentally for a long time.
That's right. I agree.
There's like, you know, the scribble phase, there's the stick figure phase, there's all these like, there's like a smudgy phase, a finger painting, whatever, and there's like geometric stuff, and then, but the actual discernible drawing line style doesn't come in, I think. I mean, it's different for every kid, but I think in my experience, it's not until like 3rd or 4th grade where a kid starts to have a recognizable drawing style.
Well, like Miles Davis said, like sometimes it takes a motherfucker a long time to sound like themselves. You know, yeah. I don't know if he swore, but I'm just attributing a curse word to him.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, yeah. And so, you know, and so like, and that's it. It's like, it takes you a long time to sound like yourself.
Yeah.
And so ultimately when I'm listening or like reading Tommy's essay, I'm thinking like, well, there's no pressure. It's not a race. You know, so you don't actually have to worry about style. But I've also heard kids, you know, in this like YouTube drawing tutorial era, and like deviant art, they're like, you know, when that was a thing or like whatever, they're like, I don't have a style. I need a style, as if that means validity. And it's like, well, actually, that's not what art is about. So let's back up. You don't need a style. That doesn't mean you're a real artist if you have a style. And then I go, what is style? And then start the record over. Right. Start this whole conversation over again.
It is like, I mean, mimicry is kind of where a lot of kids start. And that's where I started. Like, I wanted to draw like Jim Lee. And like,
Same. I wanted to draw like Jim Lee. We should have a Jim Lee off.
Oh my God. Who can do the best Jim Lee impression? Yeah. Actually, drawing impressions is kind of an interesting idea.
That is an impression. Or an interesting idea.
If you could draw like something Jim Lee has never drawn before,
but in his style.
In his style. I think we talked about this. I did some pages for that Bart Kira.
Oh yeah. Bart Kira, hell yeah.
Trying to draw Simpsons characters in a Simpsons style, basically with, I guess, manga tools and like Otomo tools. Like I just used the G-nib.
Yeah, hell yeah.
But I tried to ink it really fast to try to get that like. But anyway, trying to draw in those two styles at the same time was really fun and like really interesting. People have beef with that project, but I don't know.
Why do people have beef with Bart Kira?
You know, I'm not even sure I really understand it. I'm not sure I know. I think they thought it was like, why? I think it was kind of like why did this go on for the whole thing? I think they may have thought it was like a silly, fun goof, and then it became like they did the whole thing. And I was kind of just like, well, that was the point from the beginning, wasn't it? Like they wanted to do
They're following it to its logical conclusion.
Yeah. So I'm not sure why people have beef.
But I don't know. Is that why they started it?
I don't know. My impression was they wanted to do the whole series, but maybe that just came along later and people were sick of it and they got annoyed by it.
I don't know. You know, it's funny because there is this kind of like weird double standard of people who make like mashup zines for fun and then nostalgia art. Where's that line? You know what I mean? Like, what's the difference between like in that zine I have Cyclops shaving Wolverine's back.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, that's a fun lark, right? I'm not trying to make nostalgia art there.
Right.
I'm just making a joke.
You're not like, oh, the X-Files are going to love this.
Right. Check out my X fan fiction, you know? No, I was just making a joke. But, so what I'm saying is, when does it stop being fun, winky, kind of like, you know, alternate underground art, and it start being... You know, when does it cross over from that into nostalgia art, you know, for profit?
I mean, that's probably different depending on what it is. I don't know. I mean, that's a zine that that's full of other stuff.
Right,
like
right.
That's a random thought that has entered your mind.
Totally.
That has now become a part of something bigger. That's full of other thoughts that don't have to do with X-Men.
Right. Exactly.
I think if it was a fit, but I don't know. I don't have beef with fanzines either, I guess.
No. Fanzines are fine. I'm saying I didn't make a mashup book and sell it to fans of X-Men is what I'm saying.
Right, yeah. And there's a lot of Instagram accounts that are like that too, where it's like they draw combinations of things.
Right, exactly. That's what, that nostalgia mashup. It's like the art equivalent of like a high school locker.
Yeah.
You're like, I like Bob Dylan.
That's a great way to describe it.
And I like Basquiat, and I like, I think Bart Simpson's cool. So I'm going to draw a Bart Simpson Basquiat playing the guitar. He's playing a Bob Dylan song. So I'm going to make it look like a Bob Dylan cover album. The album of an album cover or whatever. Cover of an album cover. What am I saying? I'm going to do Bart Simpson as Basquiat on a Bob Dylan album cover. There we go. I got it out.
Yeah, it's it's cross colors.
Cross colors Bart.
Yeah.
Well, you're gonna do Homer, so I'll do Bart then.
I don't think I've ever done anything like this before. I'd say that's maybe a success. I don't know. Your Bart is way more on model than
on model. I didn't round the tips of his hair though. They're supposed to be slightly rounded.
Oh, they are?
Just slightly. I'm gonna round off those tips.
Matt Groening is I don't know if he's on like the board of directors or he's an investor or something, of the American Visionary Arts Museum in Baltimore.
Oh,
which I thought was like, I mean, I don't have any. I like Matt Groening; he's cool, but
I don't. I have no beef with
that. That gave him some like extra cred in my eyes. That
don't eat my cow pants, man.
Yeah.
That's the saying, right? His famous saying.
Pantsabunga.
Pantsabunga. Turtle-a-bunga.
Cool.
Yeah.
Should we wrap this up?
Yeah, I'm good.
Sweet.
Toodles.
Toodles.